All right, hi everybody. This is the fourth video in our series on applied analytics and what we're trying to do with some of these tools and some of the lessons learned in terms of developing players and the game model and coming up with principles, right? KPIs and principles. So we had our last video on key performance indicators after we went through the player blueprint and game model videos, what we're trying to do there and how the TACbot, our AI, can help you put together blueprint and put together a game model, as well as come up with key performance indicators and what your deliverables are, right? Both in terms of a cognitive map of the game and physical performance, right? So some of this bleeds into that, but ultimately, once you have your KPIs, what are the lessons learned? Like once you've applied all this, what do you expect to get? And what we can do is sort of tell you what we learned as we went along. So that's a quick recap. Some of the stuff that's in our live streams, the player blueprint, the game model, KPIs, that's where we are. And now what you're seeing is that this whole analytics space is sort of evolving, right? So once you have the blueprints and the game models and the KPIs, well, now we can start analyzing the game. And so first generation analytics kind of revolved around events, right? And performance tracking. And maybe some new interesting analytics in terms of certainly the goals, but packing, right? Trying to come up with a weighted model or something like passes per defensive action, right? Trying to come up with a weighted model to value defense or value offense, right? And while those KPIs and statistics started to build, as we started to build on those KPIs and statistics, more advanced models came out, right? So expected value of possession, VAEP, that IX uses, and predictive modeling that Lobanovsky and Bielsa kind of pioneered, right? Certain guys, David Sumter at the Barca Innovation Hub, pioneered 12 football. And so there's sort of evolution from just sort of raw event data or advanced analytics into modeling. And the third generation is applied AI, right? So it's cognitive profiling, associative mapping, and measurement, pitch control, and predicting passes and that kind of thing, right? So, associative mapping would be what kind of areas, what kind of plays, almost like what kind of automations are you doing in what kind of situations and what areas of the field, right? Cognitive profiling is a profiling of the player in terms of their skills and decisions they make, right? Pitch control is a predictive model that tries to anticipate where a defense, under what patterns and conditions, might be weak, what decisions lead to defensive weakness, and where physical location and timing of the appearance of defensive weakness, right? So where the gap's going to be in the defense, given a certain pattern, given certain pairs, given certain ball movements, where the gaps are going to be. And interestingly enough, when we started looking at pitch control models, the patterns that developed weakness, at least in the proximity of the ball, were the same patterns as futsal, right? So 3-1 automations, the Boca system, the chain automations, and the 4-0 automations, right? And then how you move or shift between those according to the defensive vision. So as the defensive condition changed, as the automation changed, it became predictable in the outdoor game as well as the five-a-side game where the weaknesses would, right? So the game is susceptible to automation based on these second and third generation analytics, right? That are kind of building those automations. And then I suppose the last one is a psychometric map, right? And you see some of this now with the cognitive coaches, right? Who are on the one hand trying to improve the cognitive performance players in terms of perception cues and automations and that kind of thing, but also profiling those players cognitively, and finally mapping the game by perceptive cues and feelings, right? So what did you sense here? What did you feel here when this happened? When that happened? When you see this, do that, right? And trying to predict or trying to give cognitive cues to predict what's going to happen next, and give rules of thumb. You know, it's the old rule. If you can't find Muggsy Bogues, pick up the ball, right? Um, you know, relative to the 5 3-point lead who played for Charlotte, right? So if you have a certain field, players are now mapping perceptions and feelings on the field, which will tend to, if they can implement them, if they have the right cognitive profile, and there's no latency in the decision making, which will tend to make teams one step ahead, right? Which is the goal of all this, right? So sort of that's where second and third generation analytics is going. Third generation analytics, especially in terms of what they're doing in the hockey in particular, sometimes basketball, right? They're cognitive coaches specifically dedicated to measuring decision making and making decision making better. So it's sort of a whole realm of cognitive association, right? And you know, at every stage, right? Whether it's the data capture of those baseline KPIs, and then using regressions and machine learning to customize player development, right? Getting some physiological and cognitive deliverables, right? All this kind of fits together, it's in one direction, right? But the third generation, you know, psychometrics, cognitive mapping, cognitive profiling of players, and integrating that into training is fairly new, right? The cognitive coach, specifically dedicated cognitive coach, that's going to be fairly new, based on the work that's been done through first, second, and third generation analytics. So I think we did discuss in one of our last videos the tactical integration of game theory, right? Sort of going into first, second, and third generation analytics, you're measuring pitch control, anticipating where weakness is going to occur, and then coming up with press triggers to preclude that weakness or optimize that weakness depending on what side of the ball you're on, right? Now you're seeing defensive automations, right, where you didn't see so many before. And for us, you know, our defensive automations have been not only press triggers that the offense is doing, but press triggers from a defensive perspective. As in, if we get caught in maybe a passive low zone, as soon as that happens, then we're pressing out. It's sort of our own press trigger. And, you know, it takes time to implement all these things, right? Because you don't want to be there coaching on the field. You don't want to be informing the offense of what's about to happen, right? So you're not only you're able to measure these things, right? Not only are you able to predict them, right? Now you have to cognitively the team to produce these things, right? So all three levels of integration of analytics. So it's basically, we did discuss KPIs and turning analytics into deliverables, right? And how the KPIs can be used to develop practical coaching tools, like the quality of box entries, the value of certain the value and probability of certain passes, retention under, and XG chain modeling, right? How you predict defensive weakness, and how you turn defensive weakness into optimized goal scoring opportunities, right? So the through balls coming in earlier when the defenses are less settled, right? But the ultimate shot is more delayed closer in, for instance, right? So those are all things that analytics is massaging or many underlying probabilities of the game and improving output, both on defense and offense, right? So ultimately, not only is there going to be a coaching, you know, a cognitive coach, but it's going to be a tech roadmap, right? And data providers such as TouchLink was our sponsor. www.touchlyink.com, touchlink.com, right? Structuring and inputting the data is going to be customized. It's going to fit both your data capture and all the way through to your coaching, integration, and then your game models and deliverables, right? All that depends on the capture of the initial data, right? So, lessons learned and key concepts, right? It's not just principles of play, right? It's all the way up down the deliverable chain. So, footedness, right? Multi-directional orientation of players. So they're not just forward, they're not just direct. Understanding weakness and anticipating weakness of defense. So half spaces, zonal gap, dropping in between the lines. All those skills need to be taught, and they're not taught properly today, right? And then in terms of your AI, it's got to understand all these concepts, what you're trying to deliver in terms of training, but also understand like how you're scouting these teams, right? So cultural modeling, team profiling in terms of what kinds of players and what kinds of positions are predominating given a team, right? Doing statistical regressions based on the efficiency theory, the SPOTM theory, soccer-specific point decision enable matrix, which basically takes like an efficiency ratings NFL to measure the impact of efficiency, right? How much better you make your whole team, right? And then ultimately it's a new frontier meshing the data, the cognitive psychology, the mapping and indexing of the game and the game theory at the point where we're going to delve into actual use cases, right? And having covered here, the most important lessons learned and the player blueprint, the game model, the KPIs, now the lessons learned in terms of how to apply analytics. Finally, we're gonna, I guess last in this initial intro series is how to design the technology. So we're gonna go through that next time. And for now, www.thetacbot.com. You can launch our beta from our website, as long as you have a ChatGPT account, uses those models. And thanks, sir, touchlink.com. Thanks, everybody.